What's up, you crazy kids? It's Mr. Wicklehouse. Today we're talking about solving quadratics by factoring and completing the square. Alright, let's get this show on the road. So you might be asking yourself, why in the world am I doing this? Why do I have to do this? The solutions to quadratic functions typically will give you some very important information about what is going on in this situation. These solutions are usually represented by the x-intercepts of these functions. So that's why we're solving these things. So, for many real-world problems, these x-intercepts represent points of interest. In other words, they're going to tell us something. So, for instance, if you throw a ball up in the air, we can represent the motion of the ball using a quadratic function, and the x-intercept represents where the ball started, and after it is thrown, where it will land. So we can figure out distance, like from point A to point B sometimes doing that, or guess hypothetically where the ball should end up. In business, we know that price times the number you sell will give you your revenue / profit. This typically ends up being a quadratic function and will allow you to figure out what you need to do to find your maximum profit. We can also use quadratics for many other things, such as the speed an object is moving, and calculating square footage, so on and so forth. There's just tons and tons of situations where quadratic functions come up. So, I'm going to show you how to do one by hand. Okay? So first things first, we always need to rewrite these equations so that they equal 0 first before you do anything else. So if I'm solving this by factoring, I need to get this quadratic equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 5n and add 6 to both sides, and I'm going to get n squared minus 5n plus 6 equals 0. Okay? Now we're going to factor it. So, as many of you should know throughout your experience in math how to factor things, we do these little parentheses, still have equal to 0 because we're dealing with an equation, and what goes in these first two spots are the two things that multiply together to give me n squared. Well, those are usually pretty easy. It's n times n. Okay. Now we're trying to figure out what times what gives me 6, but adds together to give me negative 5. Okay. Well, I know that to get 6, there's a couple different ways to get 6. One is 6 times 1. One is 3 times 2. And these could both be plus or minus, plus or minus, plus or minus, plus or minus. Okay? If I do positive 6 and positive 6, that's going to be 7. If I do negative 6 and negative 1, that's going to be negative 7. So that's not going to work. If I do 3 and 2, both positive, I get 5. If I do both negative, I get negative 5. Negative 5 is what I was looking for, so I'm going to do negative 3 and negative 2. There we go, all factored out. Okay. So now that I have it factored, I can find my solutions or x-intercepts. And what I do is I take each one of these factors and set it equal to 0. So n minus 3 equals 0, n minus 2 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, I get n equals 3. Add 2 to both sides, I get n equals 2. So my solutions here are 3 and 2. Okay? Alright. Now, I'm going to make your life easier by doing it in the calculator. This is going to be super easy. It's going to be super great. You're going to love it, and this will work for anything that you're trying to factor that is factorable. Again, remember, you always, always, always need to write these equations so that they're equal to 0 first. So remember before we did that, 5n plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to use that equation, and I'm going to turn on my calculator first. That's not what we're wanting to see here. Clear that out. Okay. I know this says n, but it's just a variable. I'm going to go ahead and represent that in my calculator as x. So I'm going to do x squared minus 5x plus 6. Okay, now I've got my equation put into the calculator, and I'm going to graph it. There's my graph. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're looking for the x-intercepts. So we're looking for x-intercepts, and those are going to be our solutions. Now this one is pretty easy. We can kind of look at it and see where they're at. Let's zoom in a little bit though. Actually, we'll just change the windows. And we'll go from, let's go from -1 to 10, and we'll go from -3 to 10, and graph it again. And this is going to be a lot easier to see now. So we're a little closer. So we can see here that we're zooming in here. Is at 2 and 1, but if I'm not 100% sure, what I can do is go to our calc trace button here. So hit second trace, and it takes us to calculate. Now for this one, I'm looking for zeros, which is another name for x-intercepts. Okay, so I'm looking for zeros, so I'm going to that. Wish this thing would stay in focus. Let's get it back in focus. Maybe it'll stay that way. There we go. So, and down here we can see that it wants the left bound. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here on our picture and go to the left of this intercept right here. So we're going to hit enter, and then we're going to go over so that we're below and on the right side of that x-intercept. And now it's going to want us to guess, and we're going to say yes, and we can see that we get one of our x-intercepts at 2 rather. X equals 2. We can do that again to get the other one. Go on the left, go on the right, hit enter, and we get the other one, x equals 3. Easy peasy. You get used to doing that. You can find these x-intercepts in the calculator. Super easy, no problem. Alright? Alright. Now, completing the square. Completing the square is great fun. Let's do one. It's super great. I swear it's super fun. You know what it means when math teachers say something's super fun. You won't believe how much fun this is going to be. I can hardly believe it myself how much fun this is going to be. Rock and roll! Woo! Like dude here likes to say. Alright. Oh, even further, let's do the fun song. SpongeBob sings it. F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all down here in the deep blue sea. And then Plankton sings, F is for fire that burns down the whole town. U is for uranium bombs. N is for no survivors when you're... Okay. What in the world is wrong with me? Is this year over yet? It's not. Okay, let's do completing the square. Honestly, this is going to be super fun. Let's do it. Okay, here's an example. Finally, here's the example. Quit singing to me, Mr. Wicklehouse. What is wrong with you? Let's get this over with. Okay, so first thing we want to do, this is a little different than getting it equal to 0. I want to take this number and I want to move it over here. So I'm going to add 27 to both sides, and I get a squared plus 8a equals, I'm going to leave a little bit of space here so that I can do some work in it, equals 27 minus 8, that is going to be 19. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this value right here, the b value of my quadratic, 8, and I'm going to divide by 2, then I'm going to square it. 8 divided by 2 is 4, square that, I get 16. I'm going to add 16 here and add 16 here. So finally I'm left with a squared plus 8a plus 16 equals, see, that's 35. Okay. Now I'm going to factor this. Okay. So I'm factoring it just like I normally do. Equals 35 now. Get a, and 4 and 4 gives me 16. And when 4 is added together, I get 8. So this ends up being a plus 4 quantity squared equals 35. Okay? Alright. Now that I've completed the square, I'm solving for a slash x, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Remember, when I take the square root, I do plus or minus the square root. So we're at a point now that when we're taking the square root, we've got to do plus or minus. That leaves me with a plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 35. Okay. Subtract 4, I get a equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 35. There's my solution. Okay? And that's how I would do it. Alright. Again, we can solve these in the calculator. I wouldn't really call it completing the square. All I'm doing is the same thing that I just did before with my function. I'm going to change my window back to negative 10 again, and we'll go back in here, clear that out. This time we need to get this equal to 0. So I've got a squared plus 8a, add 8, so that's minus 19 equals 0. So I'm going to do x squared plus 8x minus 19. And we are going to graph it. Okay. So we can see now that this is going to be a little bit messier than what we just had. Let's go out to negative 12. Graph it. There we go. It's going to be a little bit messier. Did I screw something up before? I don't know. Let's see what happens here. Second calculate, 0. There's our little cursor. Enter, enter, guess. No, that's about right. x equals negative 9.9. Then the other one, we're going to go back over here. Oops. Go back to the second. Calculate. 0. Going back over here to the left bound. Enter. Enter. Guess. That one is x equals 1.9 about. Okay? So that's how we would do it in the calculator. Most of your answers are going to look like this, however, on a multiple choice test. So completing the square is a lot of fun. That being said, game over, end of video. Come and talk to me if you need help. See you later.